Good morning.
Good morning.
So practice period opens this Sunday at the all-day sitting. There are almost 50 people in the practice period.
Whoa.
So we are, part of me wants to say we are a force of goodness in the world. We're just a bunch of human beings trying to help each other and the whole world wake up. So even though the due date was several days ago, if you suddenly remembered that you hadn't sent in your application or were inspired to join in, please, but don't do it now if you want to do it. Please come to the all-day sitting. I've been saying this, but I'll keep saying it, is if you've been to other Shuso entering our head I don't like the old language. The person, our Sangha member who's helping lead the practice period, the Shuso, we have to convince her to stay. We have to convince her that we really, it's just, we're so happy she's doing this. So please show up. Come in person if you can, online if you can't, so that we all join our hearts. And it's also really important to say, whether you're in the practice period formally or not, you're in the practice period, because it's happening and everybody is always welcome here. And it's a little bit like, I don't know, it's a little bit like saying, I mean, if you're, I'm not following my own metaphors anyway. It's multitudes of all of us doing this together. And if you're formally in the practice period, it means you really get to participate in the teas and the whole kind of infrastructure that helps build community and Sangha and deepens the teachings. Oh, Tuesday. Then Tuesday is the Shuso is giving her first talk, and it's a way-seeking mind talk. And it won't be recorded. So because we want to protect confidentiality and allow the Shuso to be as vulnerable as she wants to be, we don't want to put it on YouTube. So if you want to hear her way-seeking mind talk, you need to be here on Tuesday. And last but not least, we are doing a rehearsal for the opening ceremony here, and we're going to do it directly after we close this morning's session. So if everybody at the end can just kind of jump up and help clean up, and then we can move into the rehearsal for those people. You know if you're a part of it. And okay. Making a bridge from these last weeks, Becoming Yourself, Suzuki Roshi, the new book about Suzuki Roshi's teachings, and the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is what we're going to be. It's a really early Chinese extravagant text. And we'll begin that next week. But here's a quote from Ben Connolly, just wrote a book about the Avatamsaka Sutra called The Flower Garland. Inside the Flower Garland Sutra, which is another name for the Avatamsaka Sutra. Wanyan Buddhism and the Modern World. I want to quote him just a little bit. Says the Flower Garland Wanyan Buddhist tradition is relational, practical, and positive. Sounds like something appropriate for all times and for these times. It arose 1,500 years ago. It has a great emphasis on interdependence and thus on the value and importance of every aspect of our phenomenal world, of this world. Flowers, people in all their diversity, animals, meals, gardens, soil, labor, suffering, and love. We are invited to see a world so abundant that we don't feel a need to hold on to anything. value and importance of every aspect of our phenomenal world. So that's why I wanted to make this bridge to Suzuki Roshi, because I want to talk a little bit about him as a person. Because he's a particular human being who's part of our lineage and for whom we have a great debt of gratitude. Last night, a group of old Zen people got together for dinner, and it's amazing when you get old Zen people together. It's like a family gathering, and all everybody wants to do is tell family stories, whether you've told the same story 100 times, but each time the story opens up a little bit, it's like you learn something you didn't know, and so of course stories about Suzuki Roshi arose, and also stories arose about David Chadwick, who wrote this Life and Zen Teachings of Shunryu Suzuki, Crooked Cucumber, David Chadwick, which is a great book. And David now has a new book out, something about Tassajara stories. I think he interviewed all of a whole bunch of the early people at Tassajara, so you too could read about these Zen family stories. So I want to just name David Chadwick as a particular person, because David Chadwick, who I know and many of us know, I think sometimes the archetype of Zen is, we're in these robes and we're doing these forms, and everybody's very calm and very precise and very measured and equanimous. And David Chadwick is just a wild man. So I don't know if this story will make sense, but one story that got told last night is if you go to a Zen center ceremony, they line you all up by when you were Shuso. That's so it's very, there's a lot of rank. We've watered that down a whole lot. And so they're ready for this big ceremony. Blanche is apparently one of the people who's orchestrating it, who was one of the abbesses, first woman abbot. So they're all ready, they're all solemn. And the story is that David Chadwick shows up at the door, and he is just disheveled and wild, and his shirt is, it's just the way David was. I'm doing this to reassure us that we're all fine. You don't have to look like or be any particular thing. And Blanche says, because David was one of the very first that Suzuki Roshi ordained. And then we all have ideas about who should be ordained and who shouldn't be ordained, and what they should look like, and what David's just wild. Blanche stands up and says everybody needs to move down one seat because David is one of our first original ancestors here, and David needed to take his seat in his wild, dirty civilian clothes. And he's brilliant. The books that the gifts that he's given to us are amazing because he loves Suzuki Roshi so much. So I thought I would start a little here. You can find what I marked. From the introduction. The teaching must not be stock words or stale stories, but must be always kept fresh. That is the real teaching. It comes through each one of us. One night in February of 1968, I sat among 50 black-robed fellow students, mostly young Americans, at Zen Mountain Center, Tassajara Springs, 10 miles inland from Big Sur, California, deep in the mountain wilderness. This is David talking. The kerosene lamp-like light illuminated our breath in the winter air of the unheated room. Before us, the founder of the first Zen Buddhist monastery in the Western Hemisphere, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, had concluded a lecture from his seat on the platform. "Thank you very much," he said softly, with a genuine feeling of gratitude. He took a sip of water, cleared his throat, and looked around at his students. Is there some question, he asked, just loud enough to be heard above the sound of the creek gushing by in the darkness outside. Is there some question? I bowed, hands together, and caught his eye. Hi, he said, meaning yes. Suzuki Roshi, I've been listening to your lectures for years, I said, and I really love them, and they're very inspiring. And I know that what you're talking about is actually very clear and very simple. But I must admit, I just don't understand. I love it, but I feel like I could listen to you for 1,000 years and still not get it. Could you just please put it in a nutshell? Can you reduce Buddhism to one phrase? See, David was wild. Who else would dare to ask that? Everyone laughed. He laughed. What a ludicrous question. I don't think any of us expected him to answer it. He was not a man you could pin down, and he didn't like to give his students something definite to cling to. He had often said not to have, quote, some idea of what Buddhism was. Isn't this reassuring? I love these stories. We can just relax. I mean, pay attention, but Suzuki Roshi did answer. He looked at me and said, everything changes. And then he asked for another question. Everything changes. I will just insert here, because I've been thinking about it recently, is my good friend Mark Lesser, who writes books, a longtime practitioner. He hasn't written this book yet, but I think he should. I think it's the best one he could ever write. He was going to title it Buddhists Against Change. I'm sure I practiced because I do not like change. Okay, a little bit more from here. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi was a Japanese priest in the Soto school of Zen who came to San Francisco in 1959 to minister to a small Japanese-American congregation. He came with no plan, but with the confidence that some Westerners would embrace the essential practice of Buddhism as he had learned it from his teachers. He had a way with things. Plants, rocks, robes, furniture, walking, sitting, that gave a hint of how to be comfortable in the world. Isn't that beautiful? How to be comfortable in the world. He had a way with people that drew them to him, a way with words that made people listen, a genius that seemed to work especially in America and especially in English. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, a skillfully edited compilation of his lectures published in 1970 by Trudy Dixon. Marjorie's here today, knew her well, has sold over 1 million copies in a dozen languages. This was published some time ago. It's a reflection of where Suzuki put his passion in the ongoing practice of Zen with others. He did not wish to be remembered. He did not wish to be remembered or to have anything named after him. He wanted to pass on what he had learned to others, and he hoped that they, in turn, would help to invigorate Buddhism in America and reinvigorate it in Japan. Because I'm going to read to you in Becoming Yourself, reflections of Mitsu, who was Suzuki Roshi's wife, about Suzuki Roshi. And she always wondered what your partners or best friends or would say about you. So I'm going to read a little of that. But here's what David says something about Mitsu. David says to her he wants to write a book about Hojo-san. That was the affectionate name. Oh, thank you for writing about Hojo-san, she said with the pitch ascending on thank. Hojo-san is what she always called her husband. Hojo is the abbot of a temple, san is the polite form of address. So you really think it's okay for me to do a book on Suzuki Roshi? This is David asking Uitsu. Oh, yes, yes, she said emphatically. Tell many funny stories. Funny stories, yes, but not just funny, serious and sad ones too. Everything, right? Yes, but people like funny stories. Mainly, you should tell funny stories. That will be good. Hojo-san liked funny stories. This makes me cry. This is, and I've said, you've heard me say this over and over, is that if you go to Suzuki Roshi's unedited talks, they have in parentheses, they put laughs, laughs, laughs. I mean, he laughed all the time, but you don't necessarily see that once it gets edited because they take all that out. Mainly, you should tell funny stories. That will be good. Hojo-san liked funny stories. Everyone will be very happy to read them. Just this last part is, so they're talking about, that it's okay to write a book, but he didn't want anything like that. It would be impossible not to misrepresent him. And you know what Nori Roshi said over 20 years ago. Nori was a colleague of Suzuki Roshi's, a strict and traditional priest, now old and revered. No, what did Nori-san say? That Suzuki Roshi was one of the greatest Japanese of his century, and that no one should write about him who doesn't know all of his samadhis, his deep states of meditation. Oh, good, she said, clapping with delight in her voice. There's your first funny story. Deeply trust this. May we continue in the spirit of Suzuki Roshi. Okay, if I tell you a few of more Mitsu stories about Suzuki Roshi. It's called My Husband Shunryu Suzuki by Mitsu Suzuki. On a hot Japanese summer day in 1949, returning to the daycare center where I was head teacher, I found a friend of mine, a monkish character in a black robe, eating a bag lunch in the hallway. A monkish character, that already tells you something about how she operated in this world. What's up, Tsunoko-san, I said. I have brought you a monk, Matsuno-san, she replied. Are you looking for a, let's see how, because I wasn't quite. So Mitsu says, to her friend, so what's up? And her friend says, I brought you a monk. And Mitsu looks at the monk, Suzuki Roshi, and says, are you looking for a wife? And those were the first words I said to Shunryu Suzuki. My friend burst out laughing and said, oh no, Hoju-san, that Reverend Abbot has a wife. He was married at that time. Then what are you here for? I asked my friend. And she says he has opened a kindergarten. He's opened a when I went to a Heiji to visit in Japan, which is the head training temple in Japan in this lineage, the Suzuki Roshi's son was the one who guided us and who was head of the training there. And his translator and assistant was a kindergarten teacher. So I think there's something there too about, I don't know, you can make your own conclusions, but somehow that moves me. Suzuki Roshi has opened a kindergarten, but hasn't got a head teacher. My father thought you would be good for the job, so I am here to introduce you. Sorry, Mitsu said, but I can't change my job so easily. I am committed to working for the center for the rest of my life. There's some very Japanese things in here, I think. And then she says, I risked my life to keep it from being destroyed during the war. Every 3 days after that, the monk would come to see me in his priest's hat, clattering along with his clogs and shading himself from the burning sun with a large black umbrella. I would say to myself, that monk has come again to ask me, but I don't want to move jobs. And this went on for some months. Suzuki Roshi was he came here to do something, and you can just feel it in these early stories, how focused he was. I kept on saying no, and he would not give up. But when he insisted that I come and see his kindergarten just once, I went to the fishing port of Yatsu, and during that visit, I said, how can I help with a Buddhist kindergarten? I am Christian. And Hojo said, and Suzuki Roshi said, better than an atheist. After that, I became the head teacher of his kindergarten. Every morning, Hojo would come from his temple, located at the foot of a mountain, to the kindergarten in town. Every morning, he went from his temple to the kindergarten. And before the children came, he did a circumambulation with the kindergarten teachers, chanting in front of the Buddha figure enshrined in the large playground. It's kind of beautiful. What an insight into this human being. I met Hojo's first wife, his wife at the time, when she brought their second son to the kindergarten. Later, she died. Suzuki Roshi had a lot of tragedy in his life. And some members of the temple tried to arrange another marriage for him, recommending this lady and that. His wife's mother was still at the temple, and I heard later she would say, our Hojo-san won't marry anyone but Mitsuno-san. This is Mitsu. He just single-minded. That's who he wanted. Once when Hojo was traveling, he saw a small girl crying fiercely for something she wanted at the train station. Her mother, who appeared to be poor, had no hope of doing anything about it. Hojo bought the child what she wanted, and then realized he had spent the money for his train ticket. These stories, there's another story, I'll diverge for just a minute, but this really helps me with my mind that can be very focused but very wandering. Is he apparently once locked? Why did I who? Anyway, he locked her by mistake in the closet and then went off.
See what?
He locked his wife by mistake in the closet and then went off to do something. And he had a reputation for being very absent-minded, but he was also very single-focused. Contradictions, we all have them, right? So he had used all the money for his train ticket. He had to ask the station master to call up the station and arrange for the ticket to be paid for later. Gee, I never had to do this before, remarked the station master. He just responded. He didn't count how much money he had or think it through. It was just there was suffering, so he responded. At Tsukoji, which is the temple that he was brought to in America, some non-Japanese Americans, many of whom were sort of beatniks, started doing zazen with him. This was during the 60s. He realized that 3 years would be too short a time to guide those people and that he would need to stay longer, so he asked me to come over. I joined him after 2 years' separation. Soon after my arrival, the treasurer of the temple said to me, we don't know what has happened to the paychecks we gave Hojo-san. They haven't been cashed. He must have put them somewhere and forgotten. So I searched among his books and found a few. The treasurer said, "Good, we will give you the checks from now on." Yep, for just a couple more stories.
Yeah.
Is this okay? Okay. This story is many people know this. Next to the temple was a grocery store run by an old woman. Hojo used to buy old radishes there. The woman finally said, "Here are some fresh ones. Why don't you take them?" And Hojo said, "Fresh radishes will be bought anyway." He would go into the store and he would buy the old and the bruised and the damaged vegetables. And I've heard stories that it drove her crazy. After morning zazen, Hojo would immediately put on his work clothes. Some of his students stayed for breakfast. My main work at Sokoji was to make vegetable pickles seasoned with rice bran paste. I also cooked all sorts of beans for snacks to be served with tea to the Japanese-speaking members of the temple. Hojo sometimes had tea with them. Another thing he often did was to recycle candles, which probably was his invention. You do that at Zen Center. If you're a Chiden, is you take care. I mean, not exactly this, but you just keep burning down the candles, and you just keep you make them beautiful again. It burns down, and you cut away the wax. And in the temple kitchen, he melted used candles and poured the wax into tea cans, a little different. But most of the time, he was preparing lectures for his English-speaking students, which were scheduled for every Wednesday morning. At lecture, an old man with a red beret often sat in the front row and corrected Hojo's grammatical mistakes right on the spot. I would speak at the audience from the top floor to see what kind of crowd was getting the fruit of his whole week's preparation. When he got only 1 or 2 people, I said, "Hojo-san, I wish you had had 10 people." And he responded, "1 and 1,000, no difference." That was always when I began this many years ago. Is just I mean, of course it matters who's here. I mean, it matters you're here, but that spirit of his is so kind of pure and beautiful. Then he started getting sick. We all know he died early. One of the most beautiful stories about him and Yvonne Rand was his attendant, and they thought that he had something transmittable. And when they found out it was cancer, his response was, "Oh, I'm so glad, because now Yvonne and I can share our plates together again." There's something very pure about this human being. Anyway, here he had a serious operation for gallstones. He was getting sick in March 1971. And he wanted to go to Tassajara so much. He went there in July for 1 month. He worked in the garden at the side of his cabin using a shovel longer than himself. His body was sweating and exhausted. I yelled at him once, "Hojo-san, you are cutting your life short." He said, "If I don't cut my life short, my students will not grow."
Oh.
So I yelled back, "Go ahead and cut your life short if that's what you want." Aren't those great stories? They really inspire me. And then you read the sort of the more Buddhist stuff. I mean, you read the Buddhist stuff, but she loved. I mean, the more I reread and read over and over again Suzuki Roshi, he was so grounded in scholasticism. He knew all the sutras. He knew all the that's why we're doing the Avatamsakas, because everything informs and shines on everything else, and he made it so simple and accessible for all of us. I think that's amazing. Okay, so someplace along the way in there, I had this brilliant question that popped in my mind that I was going to give to all of you, and now I have completely forgotten this. Young more in Suzuki Roshi's lineage than anybody ever thought. Let me just for a second here. We could do oh, I know what I could ask you. Maybe this is what I thought about before. Everything changes. I mean, you talk about anything and any of this that came up for you, including how it might inspire you or make you wonder what in the world is all of this about anyway. But in that moment, sometimes he said not always so, and asked what's the whole teaching of Buddhism. Not always so. Everything changes. How does any of this help you? Does it help you? And whatever else you want to elaborate on. Okay? So you got about, well,